Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another look at the design journals for Chronicles of Elyria. Today we'll be looking at part 15, which is going to cover player-created dungeons. And beyond that, it's going to talk a little bit about how property works, how property damage works, and a little bit more on what you can do with the property that you own and how you can build on it. So let's go ahead and dive in. As always, I'll kind of give my commentary and my feelings on the stuff as we kind of get to it, and I'll try to read through before I start blurting out stuff that they're going to cover. So in last week's design journal, player housing, architecture, and construction, we talked about how player housing interacts with the survival, crafting, nobility, I almost said mobility, and family systems to create a real purpose for player housing. We also talked briefly about how player housing interacts with the inventory system, or rather, the notable lack of inventory space to create a safe haven to store your personal treasures, but what really makes player housing safe. So in this week's design journal, we're going to talk in depth about ownership, barriers to entry, hidden chambers, defense mechanisms, and finally, damage and demolition of structures. By the time this design journal is complete, it should be clear that player housing in Chronicles of Elyria isn't just a neat place to hang family portraits, it's a sophisticated system of player-created dungeons and ultimately one of the most innovative sandbox elements in an MMORPG so far. Cool. So let's scroll down so you guys can see. We got a screenshot here. You can see there's a bookcase with a secret passage behind it. That's pretty cool. That'd be real handy for, hiding secret rooms and stuff. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what you'd want to hide, but if you want to hide it, that would certainly help. So, land ownership. So first, much like in our world, all land is owned, if not privately by individuals, by the highest government in the land. In Chronicles of Elyria, those governments are, initially at least, the kingdoms. That means that... Actually, that's a really interesting point right there. Just that little interjection of initially at least. So if the highest government, initially at least, is a kingdom, what does that mean for later in the game? Does that mean that empires can be formed? Does that mean that you can put together like a high kingdom that's made up of several kingdoms? I think that's sort of what they're implying there. I don't want to read too much into it, which is exactly what I'm doing, but that's kind of the impression I get there. I mean, why else would you say, initially at least, if... Or, I mean, they could be talking about... Actually, no, never mind, because they're not talking about ownership in that sentence. So, yeah, I think that they're kind of hinting that you can create something higher than a kingdom, which is really, really cool. It would be awesome to see a server where, like, somebody manages to conquer, like, all of the known realm in some kind of, like, Tamrielic empire, like in the Elder Scrolls games. So, that means that at game launch, all parcels of land are be owned by the kings. As a king, however, it's impossible to either defend or benefit from such a huge amount of land. So, in exchange for taxes or other resources, the kings appropriate land to citizens through one of two methods. So, first we have land purchasing, which is a family or organization of sufficient wealth can take ownership of land by purchasing it from the local count or magistrate. Count in the case of unincorporated land, and magistrate or mayor in the case of land incorporated into a town or city. The benefit of this method is it's safe, easy, fast, and gives you the ability to gain access to a large amount of land all at once. The drawback is that land can be expensive. I would assume so. And we have adverse possession, which is probably the way that a lot of people are going to try to come by their land because it is the cheapest way. So if you lack the financial resources but still want to own land, you can find a parcel of land which is currently unoccupied or abandoned and take ownership of it. It's basically squatters' rights. This is done by building a structure on the land and then defending it for a full month. Defending means preventing the actual landowner from destroying your structure. Note that the landowner, king, someone appointed by the king, duke, count, or sheriff, or someone given a bounty to do so are the only ones that can legally attack or destroy your structure. So, it's basically squatters' rights. Obviously, out in the forests, the wilderness, the frontier, places like that, adverse possession is probably going to be the way to go because nobody is really going to be on that land Nobody's going to be developing it. You get there, you're probably going to be more or less by yourself because there's really there's no other towns nearby or anything. So if you just, hold down the fort for a little while, that land will become yours. And so that's probably the way that most of the frontier type areas will be settled. However, if you want to get some land in one of the major cities or near a major city or even a smaller town, you're probably going to have to purchase it or really be prepared to defend your possession. So it's important to note that this mechanic works the same way whether the existing owner is a king or another citizen. So if someone buys a parcel or several and either doesn't log in for several months or just doesn't pay close attention to what's happening on their land, this is a viable way to reclaim land which was previously appropriated by or to another player. Alright, so that's 2 ways of becoming the owner of land. Let's look at how to lease land now. So we'll talk more about this in a future design journal on townships, but in the meantime, in addition to owning land, it's also possible to lease property from another player. Leasing is similar to purchasing, but it has a few differences. First, when you lease land, you're bound by a lease contract rather than a deed and are generally limited in the types of structures you can build on the land. Excuse me. In addition, leasing generally comes with rent or other dues in addition to taxes, but doesn't have the upfront costs that purchasing does. The trade-off here is that people who purchase a large amount of land can utilize your services to work the land or pay taxes on it for them, so the land doesn't go to waste. Also, by having someone lease the land, it's less likely to be squatted on and taken via adverse possession. So yeah, if you're not using land, you should probably at least lease it to somebody so that it's being occupied and you don't have, squatters trying to take it over. And at least that way you're, profiting from it. But if you leave the land empty, obviously you're not going to profit from it at all. So let's take a look at this next screenshot here. This looks to be, this is the hidden staircase behind the bookshelf. And it looks like there's like hay all over the floor. There's not really much more to read into it than that, but yeah. So that's pretty cool. Maybe it goes underground or something. Who knows? I guess the developers do. Home ownership. Home ownership is a closely related but slightly different subject than land ownership. In general, if you own a parcel of land, you own the structures on it. This gives you the freedom to both build as well as destroy things on the land. Similarly, you can say that if you own a building, you own all of the rooms inside of it. However, just as you can lease land, you can rent or lease rooms. Leasing rooms is done similar to the way land is leased using a special housing UI. Within this UI, which looks like a floor plan of the house, you can do things such as assign names to the different rooms, as well as limit access to different entities or groups of people. The main purpose of this system is to provide rooms in your house for your children, as well as for running establishments like inns. It's cool that they took that into consideration. I mean, obviously, most people are going to want to have their own house, but not everybody's going to be able to afford their own house. And people are going to want to be participating in stuff in town. I mean, maybe not everybody, but there's going to be quite a few people who want to be involved in the major cities and stuff. And not everybody's going to be able to afford a house there. And so it's cool that not only do they have like an inn system set up, but they have one in which players can be involved on both ends, rather than just some NPC that you can rent a room from, like every other game. So once you've updated room access, it's possible to create a lease agreement, which contains a copy of the floor plan so the leaser knows which room is theirs and what permissions they have. Let's scroll down so you guys can see. Hopefully that's good. I might be cutting it off. Let's go up a little bit. That looks better. As with many of the systems in Chronicles of Elyria, this is handled with contracts, and it's up to the parties involved to negotiate the terms of the lease agreement. Will the rent be a fixed amount per in-game year? Will it be a percentage of your total income? What happens if they break something? As usual, it's up to the individuals to enforce the contract. So if you're running an inn, you should probably have some decent scribing skills so you can write up a decent leasing agreement. Otherwise, you might get caught unprepared, I guess would be the word, and end up losing some money to somebody who, tears up one of your rooms and isn't willing to pay you back for it. So in addition to residences, and inns, it's also an obvious system for creating guild halls. You can use the access system to control who can legally enter which rooms, giving you the opportunity to have private libraries, armories, or other things which some guild members shouldn't have access to. That's pretty cool. So your guild recruits or whatever can, have access to the common rooms and things like that, but maybe you have like a secret room for the inner circle or something. Just cool ideas all around, and obviously, like they're saying, it's a very versatile system, so you can apply it to quite a few things. But yeah, so that's all well and good, but it begs the question: how do you keep people out of rooms in the first place? So first we have lock and key. To begin with, Chronicles of Elyria uses a system of keys and locked doors as a way to control access to buildings and rooms. Much like our currency system, keys are a physical object in your inventory, and if you're carrying your keys around in your pocket and someone knows where you live, they can lift your keys in order to get into your room or residence. Note that doesn't make it legal. It's just another means of gaining entry that doesn't mean picking the lock, shattering a window, or breaking down a door. Stealing's not the only way to get access to keys, however. The owner can also make copies and gift them to people for easy access. Again, having a key doesn't make entry legal, nor does granting someone access automatically give them a key. It's usually done as part of signing a lease agreement. Okay, and so I don't know if this screenshot here is a continuation of what we saw previously, but here we have some very secret looking spiral staircase. I don't know where it goes, I don't know where it comes from, but yeah, we've got oh, here we go. Leading into a basement. Okay. Some basement, right. So other defense mechanisms. While keys are all well and good and do a decent enough job of keeping people out of your room or residence in more civilized locations, in less populated areas or at night, those of a more deviant nature may still be inclined toward unlawful entry. To mitigate this, there's a number of other things that can be done to either protect your valuables or to discourage entry outright. So one of those would be hidden safes. As seen in previous design journal and in figure 1, it's possible when architecting, that's just strange, I've never heard it used like that, your home to create space for hidden safes and rooms. This won't stop those motivated and perceptive enough to spend time looking for them, but it will keep your things out of sight when you've got company over. As well, hiding things in back rooms, behind hidden doors, and inside locked objects adds more opportunities for the next type of deterrent. And that would be traps, our favorite kind. So traps ranging from simple pit traps to tripwires to pressure plates all the way to mechanical door traps can be used by homeowners to help them protect their valuables. Traps make entering a home illegally extremely dangerous because not only do you either need to know where the traps are or be fairly perceptive, but you also need to have the skills to disarm them. This limits those who can successfully rob you to those with an advanced skill set. In short, someone has to really want to enter your residence if they're going to go through that much trouble. If they do, only the last type of defense mechanism is likely to dissuade them. So, I sort of work, not really a bike shop, but it's a place that has a bike shop in it, and I am one of the bike mechanics, and we always tell people when they buy a new bike, if somebody really wants to steal your bike, they're going to steal it. Like, I've heard of people using like liquid nitrogen to like shatter locks and stuff. People will get your bike. The idea is to make your bike the least attractive target, and that's sort of what you're doing here. So you just want to make your house look so intimidating that people wouldn't want to try to break in. They'll go break into somebody else's house that maybe might not be quite the same haul, but it's going to be a lot easier to get in and out of, and they don't have to worry about, getting maimed in the process. So now we have the last type of defense mechanism, which is tamed animals and bodyguards. Having the skills necessary to successfully detect hidden doors as well as recognize and disarm a trap requires a specific type of character. However, that type of character has usually spent the majority of their time training up their deviant skills and may not, hopefully not, have spent much time in advancing their combat-based skills. I imagine most people who are going to be focusing on the deviant type stuff will probably spend a fair amount of time in combat as well, just because I feel like that the person who decides to take on that kind of role is usually somebody who is very, very much like a griefer, if not a griefer. And griefers love PvP type things. And so they're going to focus on not only being able to take your stuff, but being able to beat you in, one-on-one combat or whatever. So I feel like most of the people who go down that path are probably going to, focus on combat, at least to some degree. But obviously that's not going to be quite the same as somebody who focuses entirely on that as like a warrior. So you would still hopefully have an advantage, but who knows. If that's the case, purchasing or taming an animal to guard your residence can go a long way toward discouraging an unlawful entry. Nothing says stay out like a beware of direwolf sign. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to break in if you got like a giant wolf in your house. The more dangerous the animal, the more discouraging they're likely to be. So what, you can like tame like a grizzly bear and have a grizzly bear just like hang out in your house? That'd be pretty funny. Let's scroll down so you guys can see this next paragraph. Of course, even animals can sometimes be soothed if you have the necessary knowledge of how to do so. Heck, it may even be possible to train an animal to attack their master. That's scary. That's why, when worse comes to worse, I mean, actually, before we move on, that would be a very, very interesting assassination tactic. If you broke into somebody's house and, like, spent time training their trained direwolf to, like, maul them when they came home. And, nobody, if there was no trace of you breaking in, like, nobody would ever know. Because the dog killed him, not you. You had nothing to do with it. You just kind of convinced the dog to do it. So, I mean, that would be really interesting to see. And it's not like the dog could rat you out. It's not like Skyrim where, like, horses can tell the guards that you stole something. Anywho, so that's why when worse comes to worse, nothing's quite as good as a trusted companion who can guard your house while you're offline, I feel like. Barring that, a sellsword may be willing to offer their services for a reasonable amount of coin, but beware, they usually ask for hazard pay. I wouldn't trust a sellsword. If they're willing to like sell their skills to you, who's to say if somebody was breaking in, they're like, hey, this person has like a bunch of gold hidden, I'll split it with you. Like, obviously they're willing to work for money, so I don't know that their loyalty is really going to be that strong. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's some honorable sellswords who pride themselves in their word and their honor, but chances are, no. So here we have a very Skyrim dungeon-esque looking shot here of some kind of like old cavern type thing with some kind of puzzle door at the end of it. Pretty cool. Does remind me quite a bit of the Nordic crypts in Skyrim, but I love that game, so I mean, any influence taken from that is fine by me. So now we have damage and demolition. We're looking at what can happen to your property aside from it being stolen. Up to this point, we've been talking primarily about how to discourage people from entering your residence and what you can do to protect your valuables inside. But what if that's not the objective at all? In Chronicles of Elyria, it's impossible instead of entering a home to simply destroy it. When designing this feature, we thought long and hard about how easy or difficult we wanted this to be. In the end, we decided that the time and resources required to build a house, guild hall, etc. should make the process of destroying a building you don't own either equally expensive or equally time-consuming. Let's scroll down again. So as a result, we've designed housing so that aside from doors and windows, which can be destroyed easily enough, if you don't mind the noise, the process of destroying walls and structural supports generally requires some form of siege equipment. While it's possible to chop down or chop at a wall with a mundane item long enough to put a hole in the wall, doing so would take 10 minutes or more, plenty of time for someone to come and stop you. I don't know, man. I've seen like, oh god, what's that game? I can't remember what it's called now. It's some like medieval survival sandbox simulator that looks like every other sandbox survival simulator. But I just remember watching Let's Plays of it, and people would literally sit there with like a greatsword and just like hack at the doors or walls or whatever until they broke through for like sometimes like 30 minutes at a time. It's just like ridiculous. So I mean, 10 minutes. I don't think that's gonna stop too many people. We did this because we didn't want people running around town, whacking on buildings and leveling the whole thing in a matter of minutes. We felt like destruction of a civilized area should be a planned, organized event with plenty of advance warning and enough resources gathered to do so. So the most effective way to bring down a town is to build siege equipment at an off-site location and then move it into proximity to the town, then fire away. Okay. So speaking of fire, fire is a force to be reckoned with and unchecked has the potential to destroy entire counties, let alone entire towns. That's kind of scary. As a result, we decided that while we did want fire to be a siege mechanic in Chronicles of Elyria, burning a house or forest down isn't something that can be done accidentally. You can't set a village ablaze solely by tossing a torch on a thatched roof. It requires siege equipment with some kind of flammable fluid to use to toss flaming projectiles. But just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Yeah, seriously. One of the primary reasons for sieging another town or village, aside from invasion, is a way to loot the debris or pillage for salvage resources. However, when you use fire, there's no resources to salvage and no wreckage to be pillaged. When a building goes up in flames, everything above ground is destroyed, but below ground, ... Okay, so then we have another closer shot of this very Skyrim looking dungeon type thing here. There's like a sun and a moon on the door and some other cool symbols. Alright, so speaking of underground, we have basements and cellars. While we know there's more than enough land for everyone in Elyria, we also know that you can't always purchase the land you want to within a specific area. Sometimes you buy a parcel of land, and then before you can expand out to the neighboring parcels, they are snapped up by other interested homesteaders. As a result, we decided to add a mechanic for building cellars and basements. This gives players the opportunity to not only build out above ground, but also to build out below ground. I think this would be even more helpful in like the cities and stuff, where obviously you have a very small area because there's so many other people around you and businesses and things like that, that you can only really expand up and down. So they've talked about how multiple stories in your house are going to be very limited based on the technology of the period, you know, like how good your architect is and what level of technology everybody's got. But digging out a basement doesn't really require any technology. It just requires, you know, you to dig it out. So let's see, add a mechanic for building cellars and basements. This has a ton of uses. First, as alluded to in the last section, if you got a basement or a cellar and your village is ever destroyed, you can feel confident whatever you had underground will remain intact, unless of course they looted the hell out of that, which I feel like they would be smart enough to do. In addition, building down instead of building out makes it that much harder for keen observers to recognize there's a hidden room from the exterior of your home. You can buy a plot of land, put a small house on it, and then build an entire labyrinth underneath with nobody the wiser. That's kind of cool. While you may have to put up the occasional structural support, there's virtually no limit to how far out you can tunnel so long as you use good, sturdy resources. It should be understood that this allows you to dig tunnels even underneath parcels which are not your own. But be careful, you never know who or what may also be digging tunnels. That's kind of interesting. The who or what thing is a nice little like hint as well. Does that mean that there's going to be some kind of hostile mob underground? Like some kind of like angry mole people type thing? Anywho, the making of a dungeon. So at long last, we've come to the conclusion of this design journal. Rather than use this opportunity to talk about another game mechanic or feature, I want to use this opportunity to provide you with a narrative which will, if the rest of the journal hasn't already, lead you to an ultimate realization. Let's see. So we've just started playing Chronicles of Elyria and are the first frustrated with the limited inventory allowed by the survival mechanics. Or sorry, you. I don't know where I got we. You've just started playing Chronicles of Elyria, blah, blah, blah. But before long, you realize that you can mitigate the problem by storing the majority of your stuff in a bank box. However, at some point during your time playing Chronicles of Elyria, you gain access to something so valuable that you no longer trusted it in the hands of a bank. For example, let's say you're one of the rare few who discover the secret of becoming a lich, and you've trapped your soul in a phylactery, or like a, shoot, what do they call it in Harry Potter? A Horcrux. It's like a Horcrux. So You wouldn't want to just put your phylactery in a bank box. The owners of the bank could recognize you as a lich, illegally go into your bank box, find your phylactery, and destroy it. No, that won't do. So instead, probably in preparation for your transformation, you buy a plot of land and put a house on it. However, you don't want it to be destroyed by a fire, so you make sure to build it out of a nice hard stone. But since your castle is on the outskirts of town, so as not to draw too much attention to it, it could become a target of invading kingdoms. Even having your castle attacked by catapults could put your precious phylactery in danger. So you build your castle. Hold on, let me scroll up so you guys can see this. My Chronicles of Elyria logo is in the way there. So you build your castle and then build a basement underneath to make sure it can never be destroyed. Once you dig your basement, you realize that the more rooms and the hidden areas that are down there, the more difficult it will be for people to find your phylactery. Next, you realize that having multiple storage containers would make it difficult for players to determine which chest actually has it in it, especially if the basement and chests have traps of varying types. Next, you realize that a good rogue could work their way through your traps, and so you decide to either tame yourself or hire someone to tame some wild beasts for you. Next, since you know that those can be bypassed as well, you hire a gang of thugs to defend your basement, working in shifts to make sure it's protected around the clock. Finally, since you know nobody can protect your phylactery better than you can, you create a sleeping chamber with a large locked chest somewhere in the basement. And now you've just become the boss enemy. Here's the underground lair. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, let's see. At night, when you're offline, you make sure to log out in the special room. Lost in the basement, only you fully know the map for, surrounded by traps that only you and a few others know are there, guarded by sellswords and wild beasts inside the basement you created so as to avoid being destroyed during a siege, beneath the stone castle you created so as not to have it burned down, on the outskirts of town so as not to draw attention to yourself. Congratulations, you just created the first dungeon, and you are, for better or for worse, the game's first raid boss. This is just one of the many ways Chronicles of Elyria brings player-created content to a whole new level. So I love this idea. Rather than go out and make these like static raid bosses that just kind of sit around and wait for you to come to them, they're just there for you to fight. These are like actual player characters who have their own motivations, their own things to do, who are effectively becoming the bosses that people are going to band together and try to fight. I like it. I think it's awesome. And that's where we're going to end it for today. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully it was enlightening. I find this particular aspect of the game to be one of the coolest. Like I said before in one of the previous design journals, I really like the idea of the whole architecture system, and I'd like to dabble in that a little bit. Obviously, I want to get into like blacksmithing and shipbuilding as well, but there's just so many cool things in this game that I want to try a little bit of everything. So yeah. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to follow the link below to chronicleselyria.com, where you can find all of the latest up-to-date info about the game, as well as Q&As with the developers and things like that. And if you decide to join the community, it would be great if you could use my referral code down there as well. They'll give me a little bit of a boost toward setting up a AstartesGaming community within the game when it gets started. What else? What's the date? Today's the 9th. Now it's the 9th. So the Kickstarter starts on May the 3rd, I think. I want to say May the 3rd. So about a month away until the Kickstarter begins. So if you guys want to help the game get made, you can get involved in that as well. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Please feel free to share my videos however you guys see fit, and I will see you guys back here for Design Journal number 16.